There has been a verdict reached in the Dylann Roof murder trial. Mark, what is it?
That verdict is death. After roughly 3 hours of deliberations, a jury of 3 black members and 9 white members agreed unanimously that Dylann Roof deserves to die for the murders of 9 black parishioners at the Mother Emanuel Church in June of 2015. You'll recall that Roof had plotted this attack for 6 months. The government put on a very convincing case tracking how Roof bought the gun, went into the church, was seen leaving with the gun, and also made a big point of pointing out to the jury in closing arguments this morning that even now, 17 months after that attack, Roof continues to show no remorse. Roof was acting as his own lawyer. At one point today, he told the jury himself in his closing statement, which lasted only 5 minutes, I felt like I had to do it. I still feel like I had to do it. Again, no remorse whatsoever. So the verdict again, death. A death sentence given down by this jury in Charleston, South Carolina, to 22-year-old Dylann Roof for the massacre at Mother Emanuel Church in June of 2015.
Do we know, Mark, any sense of what his demeanor was when this verdict was read?
I don't. I'm standing outside, but I will have that for you shortly. I'll tell you that by and large, he has been completely detached from these proceedings day in, day out. He tends to look down, doesn't make eye contact with anybody. Whether that changed in this, his moment of judgment, I just don't know, but I'll find out for you.
Mark, the jury took only about 2 hours to reach this decision. It's about the same time that they took to find him guilty. Am I right?
Yeah, that's about right. I think this took maybe an hour long. I think it was 2 hours to find him guilty, 3 hours to sentence him to death. But basically, in both instances, took no real time whatsoever. Look, the guilt phase was not a surprise. The government's case was almost completely buttoned down and wasn't even contested.
Mark, if you don't mind hanging on for just a second, I want to bring in Rikki Klieman, legal analyst for CBS News, who's on the phone right now. Rikki, we have heard now from Mark that there is a guilty verdict. Many people were expecting this. I want to ask you what happens now.
Well, at the time, of course, that there's a guilty verdict, then it's up to the judge, of course, to enforce that guilty verdict by making it a judgment of the court. It is, in fact, a final judgment of the court. And as Mark has been telling this story so eloquently as this trial has been going on, he knows that this is just one half of this case, and that there is also the possibility of the state going forward with its own prosecution for murder of Dylann Roof, and that there may be yet another trial. And one of the reasons that can happen and might happen is because if there is any possibility of error in the federal trial, the government would like to make sure that this death sentence could be reached yet again in the state court, just to make sure that it is in fact carried out. Now, the process of appeals is really what comes next from the defense side, but judging by Dylann Roof's conduct throughout this criminal proceeding on the federal side, he may decide that he needs to lodge an appeal, or his standby counsel to protect the record will automatically lodge the appeal, because that is what happens in death cases. But he could go the route of Timothy McVeigh, who we may remember from the Oklahoma City bombing case, who at some point during the appellate process of his death sentence decided that he no longer wanted to contest it and would rather be executed. I don't have any predictions here. Dylann Roof's conduct has been anything but usual in this case, so it remains to be seen. But that's what's left, a possible state trial and, of course, the appeal.
Rikki, we are getting now, just for our viewers to know, that we have some statements from the victims' families and also from the defense of Dylann Roof. First, I want to read the statement from the family, and then I'll get your reaction to the statement from his defense. We are Dylann Roof's family. We will always love Dylann. We will struggle as long as we live to understand why he committed this horrible attack, which caused so much pain to so many good people. We wish to express the grief we feel for the victims of his crimes and our sympathy sympathy to the many families he has hurt. We continue to pray for the Emmanuel AME families and the Charleston community. That is from the statement of the family of Dylann Roof, who, as Mark Strassmann indicated earlier, have not been very visible throughout this entire legal process. Now, I want to read for you, Rikki, the statement from Dylann Roof's defense. We want to express our sympathy to all families who were so grievously hurt by Dylann Roof's actions. Today's sentencing decision means that this case will not be over for a very long time. We are sorry that despite our best efforts, the legal proceedings have shed so little light on the reasons for this tragedy. Your reaction, Rikki?
Well, I think that the defendant's family was quite eloquent, and I am sure that when you are the parents of a young man who does something this heinous, that all you can do is wonder how you raised this child and how he became the person that he became. And I think that their comments are appropriate. And of course, when you deal with many of the victims' families in this case, many of them, by virtue of their religion, have been extraordinarily forgiving, extraordinarily so. In terms of defense standby counsel, the difficulty that anyone has had with advising this defendant about how he should proceed is that, of course, he won't listen. So they're faced with the reality of having to go forward or choosing to go forward on his behalf, perhaps against his wishes, and saying that he does not know what he does, that he did suffer from some kind of mental illness, that he would not participate in his own defense in any meaningful or correct way. And, you know, you have to remember that there are defense counsel like David Brock who really believe that the death penalty should not be there, and that they are looking at this young man as someone who should be saved from himself. We don't know where that's going to go. We really just don't know.
Rikki, if you could hang on for just a second, I want to head back to the courtroom where Mark Strassmann is outside reporting now. Mark, I understand you've got some details from inside the courtroom. What can you tell us?
One new development, the formal sentencing is going to be tomorrow morning, 9:30. This is why this is going to be interesting. At that point, the judge is going to allow the relatives of victims to have their say, to directly address Dylann Roof, to in effect let him have it. They are going to be able to tell them what sort of an impact he has had on their lives by virtue of the acts that he committed at the Mother Emanuel Church, which is about 3/4 of a mile from where I'm standing. They are going to be able to tell him point blank what they think of him. And then he will be formally sentenced. Another couple of developments, these are slightly legal developments, but one of the aggravating factors was whether the jurors thought that Roof would, in fact, be a threat in prison, whether he could be allowed to have a life sentence without inciting violence in prison. The jurors unanimously agreed that he would be a threat to incite violence if he received a life sentence. He is also now asking for a new legal team to be appointed to file a motion for a retrial. The judge has told him that he thinks that his legal counsel is sufficient, but that if Roof has an explanation for why he needs a new legal team, he will consider that now in the morning. Of course, if you recall, Roof rejected his own legal team in this penalty phase of the trial, electing to go at it himself, largely because he admitted he did not want to introduce any evidence of a mental health history, still do not know what that mental health history is because it was never introduced. The judge has said he's going to release that history in about 10 days after this trial ends.
Mark Strassmann reporting outside the courtroom. Mark, we look forward to your evening news report tonight on CBS. Thank you for joining us. Rikki, I want to ask you, we just heard from Mark about the decision now that Dylann Roof would like to seek new counsel. How would that affect the appeal process?
Well, whoever is his counsel, whether the judge decides to keep his current, as I call them, standby counsel, since Dylann Roof refused to listen to them about almost anything, or whether the judge decides that because this is a death case, that he should appoint new counsel. Either way, Dylann Roof, according to Mark, is seeking a motion for a new trial that is one of the appropriate, let me rephrase that so I make sure I'm heard correctly, that is a correct thing to do. I didn't want people to think I said inappropriate. I meant it is appropriate. So a motion for a new trial is part of the procedural process. Filing for an appeal is part of the procedural process, whether it's his current counsel or new counsel. These things will apparently go forward. Now, it makes you wonder, since Dylann Roof refused to listen to very experienced counsel throughout, if he's going to listen to anyone, or is this somehow that light is dawning on him that he's really going to die? You know, there have been reports that he offered to plead guilty to everything for a life sentence. I don't know if that is true or false, but if that is true, maybe he does want new counsel, and maybe the smart thing to do for a judge is to say, look, it's a death case. Let's give him new counsel, let them file the motion for new trial and file the appeal. Or a judge could say, you have some of the most competent counsel in the land, which, by the way, is true, with these particular lawyers, and you should go forward with them, and your real only difference of opinion was that you didn't want a mental illness defense.
Rikki Klieman, CBSN legal analyst, thank you so much for your analysis. We appreciate it as always. Again, if you're just joining us, the news out of Charleston, South Carolina, Dylann Roof, the man convicted of massacring 9 black men and women at Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina. Jury has reached a decision. He will be sentenced to death. The assistant U.S. attorney, the prosecutor, saying that Dylann Roof was unrepentant